12th, 2018, my entire life turned upside down. I woke up at 3 a.m. to one of the scariest moments of my life. I couldn't breathe. My face was tingling like I was about to pass out. I was sobbing uncontrollably, and my heart was racing. What I didn't know at the time was that I was experiencing a 3-hour panic attack. And at that moment, I realized I can't keep living like this. Something needs to change. And the sad reality is that this all could have been avoided, but I was so focused on increasing my income, reaching financial independence, that I pushed myself beyond my limits. And why did I do that? I did that out of fear. Fear that I would end up back where I was in 2009. Did anyone else here graduate into the Great Recession, 2009? Yeah, I see some hands raised. That was rough. At the time, we were living in a cockroach-infested apartment. I was making a $12,000 per year AmeriCorps stipend. And money stress consumed our thoughts. Even a simple $1 Redbox movie felt like a luxury. So after that moment, I made it my mission that I was never going to struggle like this ever again. So I hustled. I increased my income. I climbed the corporate ladder, and I eventually hit 6 figures. And by 2018, I had achieved everything that I had set out to do, yet I was burned out and miserable. So much so that after that 3 a.m. panic attack, I had to take 6 months completely off of work to recover from burnout and the severe anxiety that I was experiencing. So I want to ask you this, and I want to see a show of hands to see if I am not alone in this. Have you ever felt completely stuck, even if you felt like you were doing everything right? I'm seeing some hands raised in the back. Awesome. So we are not alone, and it's helpful to know that. So during my medical leave, I dove into personal finances even more to understand how were people using financial freedom now, not just after reaching full financial independence. And I realized something really important. You already have more freedom than you realize. Before I go further, let me stop and introduce myself. I'm Jessica. Hi. I'm 38. I am happily child-free by choice. I hear some woos in the background. What was I going to say? I also live in the mountains of New Hampshire, which is my destination of choice. I am an avid outdoor adventurer, part-time van lifer, so if anyone wants to talk camper vans, I am happy to do that. And I'm a co-founder of the Fioneers with my husband, Corey, who's here today. And we help people build financial freedom and then use it to design lives they don't want to retire from. If you've ever heard of the term slow-fi or coast-fi, it's probably because of us. We coined the term slow-fi and popularized the idea of coast-fi within the FIRE movement. But more on those terms later. So let's get back to the story. So during my 6-month medical leave, I realized that traditional FIRE wasn't for me. I wasn't going to be able to wait the 10 to 12 more years to gain the freedom and flexibility that I craved. And at the time, I started listening to early FIRE pioneers, people who were on that path and actually getting to early retirement. So people like Carl, who's right here in the front row, Carl Jensen from 1500 Days, Tanya Hester, who wrote Work Optional, J.D. Roth from Get Rich Slowly, and Brandon Ganch, the Mad Scientist. And all of them said some sort of variation on this. I wish I had done it differently. And so I knew I needed to figure out, what did different look like? So I'm the kind of person that makes things my mission. So I made it my mission to go and find people who were using their financial freedom before reaching financial independence, to learn about their stories and to gain inspiration. So I talked to people like this guy. A lot of you probably know him, Josh Overmeyer. He's in the back waving. So Josh decided to take a gap year, which has turned into 3 years of cruising around the world, which is amazing. I talked to people like Michelle Wigg, who's an Australian woman who quit her job. She decided to work part-time and contract at arts festivals for like 3 to 4 months a year to cover her expenses, and then travel the rest of the time. And people like Michelle Jackson, who some of you might know, who quit her job to start a business having a whole bunch of enjoyable income streams that give her freedom and flexibility to work 4 days a week, 10 months a year. And people like Angela Rosman, who, when her son was born, she started working part-time. And even though her son is now 10, she never increased her hours because it was so helpful to have those extra hours in the week to take care of the things that she needed to, and to explore hobbies and interests and be a person outside of work and outside of family. So I talked with these 4 people, and then I ended up talking to about 80 more people in what turned into our Slow-Fi interview series on our blog, and then eventually our YouTube channel. And this led us to coin the term Slow-Fi. And Slow-Fi is rooted in the slow movement. So it's a philosophy that's focused on intentionality. So think slow food, you've probably heard of slow living, slow travel, right? All of those things are focused on intentionality. So Slow-Fi means you're intentionally using your financial freedom to design a life you don't want to retire from. So from these 80 interviews and our lived experience of taking this Slow-Fi path over the last 8 years, I have 3 lessons that I want to share with you today. The first is that financial freedom is a spectrum. The second is the true power of an idea called Coast-Fi. And the third is that knowing your numbers is actually really helpful, and you can use them to give you confidence to make these intentional choices and trade-offs in your life. So diving into the first lesson, that financial freedom is a spectrum. It's not all or nothing. So I used to think that you were either financially independent or you weren't, right? You were either fully fi or you needed to hustle to get there. Like it was a light switch that you either turned on or off. And what I've come to learn is that it's a spectrum. And there's a lot of stages along the path to financial freedom: debt freedom, FU money, Coast-Fi, semi-retirement. And each of these stages unlocks new lifestyle design options. And now I want to dive into a particular stage that I feel like is incredibly important and was really valuable to us on our journey, which is Coast financial independence, that middle stage. So I'd love to hear, who here has ever heard of CoastFi before? Okay, seeing a lot of hands raised. Who here hasn't heard of CoastFi? And don't be shy. Yes, I love it. Okay, I am so excited to share with you about this life-changing concept. So CoastFi is the point where you no longer need to save an additional dollar for your retirement. So everything that you've saved and invested up to this point, because of compound growth, will grow in the background to provide you with what you need. So at that point, all you need to do is cover your actual expenses, right? So when we think of financial independence, we say work becomes optional. When we say CoastFi, savings becomes optional, right? So if you're saving 40% of your income, 50% of your income, whatever that is, you could just stop doing that. And how much more freedom could you have? Sorry. So back to the story. After my 6-month medical leave, I ended up going back to work part-time, assuming that eventually I would increase my hours, get back to full-time, and we would continue on our full FIRE path. And then I learned about this concept of CoastFi. At the time, we were 31 years old, and I decided we need to make a spreadsheet to figure out, are we close, right? Are we close to CoastFi? And so I want to show you the spreadsheet, and I'm going to show it to you with our real numbers, because I've heard you all like to see real numbers. And after this, at the end of the session, if you're interested in running your own numbers, I'll give you access to this spreadsheet. So at the time, we were 31 years old. We wanted to traditionally retire at the age of 60, if not before, and we spent about $70,000 per year. And so that meant our full FI number was about 1.75 million. But what we really wanted to know was, what amount of money would we need today to stop investing for retirement? And what we found was that we would only need about $245,000. We were floored by this because, one, it felt like a really small amount of money compared to at least the 1.75 million. And we're amazed that that amount would grow even if we didn't add a single dollar. And the second reason we were floored was that we looked at our own investments and realized that we already had around $300,000 invested. So we learned about CoastFi and then realized we were there, which led me to a really important question, which was, what if I never needed to work full-time ever again? Right? And so from there, then we realized that CoastFi can unlock 3 different distinct options for you, and we've used all 3 of these options. The first is that CoastFi can allow you to take more risks. The second is you can increase your expenses for a period of time. And the third is you can decrease your income. So let's walk through those. So the first one around taking more risks. So instead of increasing my hours and going full-time and continuing on this FIRE path, I decided to start a business. And that led me down the path to starting my group coaching program and ultimately the slow FIRE retreats that I run each year. And about 9 months in, I had replaced my part-time income and decided to take this, what felt like a big, scary leap to entrepreneurship. Because entrepreneurship and starting a business can feel really risky, but knowing that I was CoastFi gave me the confidence that my future self would be taken care of. Okay, the second thing you can do is increase your expenses for a period of time. So after that, we decided to ask, what do we really want our lives to look like? And we were both intrigued by extended travel. Location independence was something that was of real interest to us, and we assumed we'd need to be FI to achieve it. And so we decided to start exploring van life. So we started off with an experiment. We did a rental. And when we enjoyed the experience so much, we decided that we were going to buy and build out our own camper van. It was really challenging to invest, and I say invest for a reason, to invest $150,000 into this camper van for our own happiness, adventure, fun. But knowing that we were Coast-Fi allowed us to do it because we knew we weren't jeopardizing our future selves. And then the last thing that Coast-Fi allows you to do is you can decrease your income, sometimes significantly. And so 2 years ago, my husband decided to quit his job, take a mini retirement for about 9 months, and then join me as an entrepreneur. And at that point, we started taking a full Coast-Fi lifestyle. So 2 years ago, since then, we haven't invested a single dollar. And that's also hard to do, right? I was in the 1 more year syndrome session yesterday, and it's really hard to make that shift from being a saver to moving into enjoyment and spending mode. But we knew that we weren't jeopardizing our future selves. And so that made that so much easier to do. And it gave us so many of the benefits of full financial independence long before reaching it. So that brings us to the third lesson, because none of those things would have been possible without knowing our numbers. And using our numbers to empower our choices versus using our numbers to see, here's how far I am away from my goal, right? We want to use our numbers to empower our choices. So knowing our numbers allowed us to do things like buy this camper van for $150,000. And we did the calculations. We figured out how much would this add to our FI timeline. It added 1 year. So think of that big purchase that you might want to make and actually calculate it. How much time would it actually add to your timeline, and is it worth it? For us, it was unequivocally worth it because this was giving us the life that we wanted. This was that post-FI lifestyle we wanted to create, but we were just doing it earlier. The second thing is it allowed us to quit our jobs, right? Reaching Coast-Fi, when my husband quit his job, we had about $750,000 invested, so we were far from full financial independence. But we knew that even if we never added a single dollar, that money would grow and provide us with what we needed. And lastly, it allows us to make day-to-day decisions that help us to reduce our money stress. So we actually had a question yesterday. We were in one of the sessions, and somebody asked us, do you ever experience fear and anxiety around money? I was like, yeah, and just to give you an example of this, last fall, we were feeling particularly anxious about money. We had just spent about 4 months traveling in our camper van, and we had only worked 5 hours a week. And we had just moved from Boston to New Hampshire, which eventually should decrease our cost of living, but we were doing a lot of expensive home projects. They were going over budget. And we were starting to feel we're spending all of this money, and do we need to go get jobs? What do we need to do? So what we did was we stepped back, we zoomed out, we looked at our finances and used our finances to empower our choices. So I'm going to walk you through what our numbers actually look like right now. So right now we're 38 years old. We actually are enjoying our lives, so we would be okay with working until around 62 if we needed to. So we decided 62 would be our traditional retirement date. Our investing balance, because the stock market's on a tear, or was, as I said, when my husband quit, it was around 750. It's now around 1 million. Was higher, now a little lower. And given that we moved to a lower cost of living area, we do expect that our annual expenses in retirement will be slightly lower, so our FI number is a little bit lower. So what we did was we asked ourselves, if we actually kept going with our current plan, right? If we trusted ourselves to move forward with this plan that we created and only covered our actual expenses, how long would it actually take us to reach full financial independence? And what we learned when we did that was that it would only take about 5 years. And we're 38, and we never, ever, ever expected to be able to fully retire at the age of 43, nor do we necessarily want to. And so the thing that we did then was we asked an additional question. What if we only covered half of our expenses with active income? What if we scaled back, right, and only generated half of the amount that we did? How would that change our FI timeline? And what we learned was that it would only change it by about 3 years, okay? And so for us, this gave us so much confidence that we could, even though we felt this fear and this anxiety, we could keep living this lifestyle that we wanted to, knowing that our future selves would be taken care of, right? So we used our finances to empower our choices. So I want you to be able to take this and run some scenarios after this presentation. So I want to walk through one more example. I want you to meet Eric, who worked with us in our Coast with Confidence cohort last fall. Eric works for the federal government. Eric would like to get out of that and start his own business. I'm surprised I'm getting a laugh right now, but this is great. And he thought he was probably close to Coast Fi, but wasn't quite sure. And so we worked with him to figure out how much freedom did he actually have to start making these changes. So at the time, Eric was 38. He wanted to fully retire at the age of 57 because that's when he could access his government pension. And expected to spend about $60,000 a year in retirement. And so we worked with him to figure out that his Coast-Fi number was actually about $415,000, okay? So then the question was, is he Coast-Fi? So we worked with him to figure out, okay, which accounts to include in that investment balance, and we learned that he had just over $750,000 invested. So he was beyond Coast-Fi. Right? He was well past the point where if he wanted to scale back and only cover his cost of living, he could. And then we also learned that if he kept everything the same, he'd retire in 6 years. So he went from saying, I'm probably Coast-Fi, I don't know, right, to actually looking at the numbers and saying, okay, I'm okay, right? I'm doing okay. And I actually would be curious of how many people in this room would benefit from really doing a deep dive into your numbers to know how much freedom you actually have. I see a couple hands going up. Yeah. So, but here's the thing. Eric didn't want to keep everything the same, nor did he necessarily feel like he needed to retire in 6 years if he could figure out how to leave his job and start doing something that he enjoyed more. So we asked a similar question. We asked, what if he scaled back? What if he only covered his actual expenses for the foreseeable future? What would that do for his FI timeline, right? If he reduced his income by about $45,000 a year, which can give you a lot of freedom, we realized that it would only add about 4 years to his FI timeline, okay? And then we decided to ask an additional question because he didn't necessarily even feel like he had to fully retire at the age of 48, right? Maybe if he's doing something he loves to do, maybe he will want to work until the age of 57 when he can access his government pension. So we asked, if he wanted to work for another 19 years, how little money could he actually generate each year in his business that he wants to start and still reach full financial independence at the age of 57? Okay, what we found was that he could only generate $36,000 a year. He could decrease his income by about $80,000 a year and still reach full FI by the age of 57. Okay? So Eric had the same realization that I did, that he already had more financial freedom than he thought. And as a result, he took a leave of absence from his job. He started applying for easier bridge jobs outside of the federal government. And he joined a business accelerator program to start building his business. So hindsight is 2020. I now know that I didn't need to stay in my toxic job. I had options all along. I could have taken a mini retirement. I could have found a job that I enjoyed more, even if it paid me less. I could have started my own business earlier. The whole time, I already had more freedom than I realized. And the strong likelihood is that if you're in this room today at Economy listening to this presentation, you likely do too. Through my group coaching programs, courses, and retreats, I've worked with hundreds of people who've gone from feeling completely stuck to finally admitting to themselves that they have freedom that they can use. So I want to ask you today if you're feeling stuck. And I'm going to share a few different scenarios. And if you hear any that resonate with you, I want you to raise your hand and keep it raised. Are you staying in a high-paying job that you don't enjoy because of those golden handcuffs? Yeah. Are you putting up with a toxic workplace because change feels risky? Okay. Are you burned out, but you don't know what you want next? Yeah, okay. Nobody's keeping their hand raised, but I'll ask you all to raise them at the end. Do you simply want more time, flexibility, and freedom than you currently have? Okay, everybody who raised your hand, raise your hand. Okay, awesome. So now I want to ask you this. What would you do differently if you realized that you already had more freedom than you thought? What if you woke up tomorrow without having that 3 a.m. panic attack? And realize that you didn't need to wait for 10, 12, 15, however many more years. You didn't need to keep hustling. You could learn from my mistakes. Because you already have more freedom than you realize, and you can start using it today. And if you do, you will hopefully avoid that 3 a.m. crisis where you know that something needs to change. Okay. Thank you.